One of the benefits of looking at older fragments, particularly literary fragments, is that it offers a chance to test out our human insights. Much of what we think we know about people can be tested by seeing whether these views were held in earlier times. And I think the best example of this kind of testing can be found with the Roman poet Ovid and the insights of the PUA sphere. The pickup artist, people like Chateau Artiste from back in the day, is somewhat adjacent to or overlapping with dissident politics because their whole operation, their value add for users, is that they show how a different view of men and women, of female psychology and sexuality, can get men further than adopting the view of women which is accepted by our ruling regime. That view, essentially, is one of gender neutrality. Men and women are equal. There are no meaningful differences between men and women. They want the same things. They want in the same way. Any differences are purely due to socialization or are irrelevant. This is simply and demonstrably incorrect. Just to take one example, women are on average much weaker than men. There are social and psychological consequences that follow from this simple physical difference. There are jobs and tasks that are better suited to men for purely physical reasons. There are behaviors toward women, such as men hitting women, which are often taboo or abhorrent owing to this physical difference. Female psychology can be more accommodating to circumstances because historically, women would be at the physical mercy of whatever men were in charge. One can see other differences, such as preference for consensus building, or accommodating oneself to circumstances rather than vigorously challenging them, as also arising from this notable physical difference. These ideas are developed in much more detail by the Harvard professor Harvey Mansfield in his book Manliness, which I recommend to those who want to see a fuller development of these ideas. But our global system wants to reduce humanity to fungible, interconnected cogs, to human resources. Differences due to culture, race, gender, and so on are inefficiencies to be excluded from this system. What the PUA guys observed was that a man could get further with women by assuming that they aren't the same, that their desires are different, and that these differences can be understood and used by men who seek to woo women. And since there was a practical benefit to challenging the system's view of gender, both for the PUAs and for those who followed them, there was a willingness to challenge that system. And that willingness to challenge can also extend to challenging the system on its other assumptions, hence the adjacency and overlap with dissident politics. But are their insights genuine? We can test that by looking at a very classic work by the Roman poet Ovid called The Art of Love, which is in many ways the original volume of pickup artist literature. First, a little background. Ovid is a Roman poet from the era of Augustus Caesar, born around 43 BC and died around 17 AD. He's one of the triumvirate of essential Roman poets, along with Virgil and Horace. Ars Amatoria, The Art of Love, was written approximately year 1, a fact which I find amusing. It's written in 3 books. The first 2 are addressed to men, and they detail how to seduce women and how to keep them once you've got them. The third book, written after the first 2, tells women how to seduce men and also how to defend themselves against the techniques he presents in the first 2 books. This is a very playful work, which uses imagery taken from nature, particularly animals, and from classical mythology. And part of its energy comes from skirting the line of what is acceptable and what is obscene or ribald. Ovid insists that his poem will be cleanly and not obscene, but it is naughty in many places. If you read the Wikipedia article on it, it will assure you that the poem is drenched in irony. Ovid doesn't really mean anything he says, and that he's really a kind of early champion of what we now know as modern sexual equality. This is nonsense, of course, and is the product of modern scholarship, which is in many ways an alchemical process for turning the cultural products of the past into something non-threatening to our modern mindset, essentially reducing every past time and every past writer into some version of ourselves. That's not my approach on this channel or in this video. Instead, let's take a look at the poem itself and see what emerges. I will note that PUA techniques are often referred to as game, which implies a certain frivolity and cunning, two characteristics that are very much in evidence throughout Ovid's poem. So when I say that I don't see the poem as drenched in irony, that doesn't mean that it's not comic, it's not playful, it's not fun. It's all of those things. I just mean that on some level he does kind of mean what he says. And let's look at what I mean by that as we work through the poem together. Let's start with the first 4 lines of the poem in the original Latin to get a flavor of what Ovid is all about. Later, I'll quote from translations, but for the beginning, let's tackle the original text. Si quis in hoc artem populo non novit amandi, hoc legat, et lecto carmine doctus amet. Arte, quite veloque rates, promoque moventur. Arte leves curus, arte regendus amor. If anyone here does not know the art of loving, artem amandi, read this, and by reading the poem, learn how to love. By art, the bark is set in motion with sail and oar. By art, the chariot is swift. By art, love is governed. Arte, the Rs in the title, is a practical skill associated with activities that you can learn how to do, like steer a ship or ride a chariot. Ovid is playfully suggesting that love involves a skill that can be taught by an expert in the same way. And you can see his theme if you look at the key words in this little set. Keywords being the final words of the lines and repeated words. If you look at the final words of each of the first 4 lines, it's 3 different forms of the word love: amandi, amet, amor, and the word moventur, a passive verb meaning to be set in motion. His theme is about setting love in many different forms, in motion. How to set love in motion by art, arte, which is the word he repeats several times in these first 4 lines. So you can see these lines forming a little unit, establishing the theme of the poem. Ovid is setting himself up as a teacher here. A little later, he in fact calls himself a preceptor, like Chiron was for Achilles, meaning the teacher or mentor, but he is preceptor amoris, the teacher of love. Royce often used to turn to science for support for his views. He would look at various research studies about men and women, which tended to show aspects of female-specific psychology that he believed men could take advantage of when pursuing women. And Ovid too relies on science in a way, or rather on common experience. So, despite the Wikipedia claim that his poem is all tongue-in-cheek, there is a sense in which Ovid is relying on common experience, or what his readers could regard as common experience. Remember that ars, artis, means a practical skill, and it is experience, usus, which he relies on in his poem. Nor will I falsely say you gave me the art, Apollo. No voice from a heavenly bird gives me advice. I never caught sight of Clio or Clio's sisters, while herding the flocks, Askra, in your valleys. Experience prompts this work. Listen to the expert poet. I sing true. Venus, help my venture. Clio and Clio's sisters are the 9 muses, who are often invoked by poets who call upon them for inspiration in their various creative endeavors. Ovid suggests it's not divine inspiration, but experience, which he is presenting here. In fact, he is himself an almost divine figure. The last 2 lines that I just quoted, let's look at the Latin original for a second. Usus opus movit hoc, vati parete perito, vira canum, ceptus mater amoris ades. Experience, or use, sets this work in motion. He doesn't call himself a poet, meaning he doesn't use the word poeta. He uses an older word, vates. He calls himself vati, which means a soothsayer, a seer, a prophet, and a poet, or as we might say, a bard, a poet in a more elevated and almost religious sense. So he's saying to listen to the expert poet, the skilled bard, the knowing soothsayer. In other words, there's a comically inflated sense of himself implied here. That's part of Ovid's charm as a poet, and it's an example of one of his key pieces of advice, which is to cultivate boundless confidence in yourself. I sing truly, Vira Canum, Mother of Love, be present at this undertaking, or be there at this beginning. So let's take a look at some of the lessons that he preserves from Usus. One lesson, which PUAs of all ages have used, is that if you want to find a girl, you go to the places where the girls go. It sounds simple, but that's what you have to do. Ovid, throughout his poem, likes to use animal imagery to capture the physical, sensual side of his advice. She won't come falling for you out of thin air. The right girl has to be searched for. Use your eyes. The hunter knows where to spread nets for the stag. He knows what valleys hide the angry boar. The wildfowler knows the woods. The fisherman knows the waters where the most fish spawn. You too, who search for the essence of lasting love, must be taught the places that the girls frequent. Avoid contracting one-itis, the sense that a girl you're into is the only one for you. Instead, PUAs advise men to be aware of the boundless variety of girls around. And Ovid says, Rome has as many girls as Gargara's sheaves, as Methymna's grapes, as fishes in the sea, as birds in the hidden branches, stars in the sky. Venus, Aeneas's mother, haunts his city. If you'd catch them very young and not yet grown, real child brides will come before your eyes. If it's young girls you want, thousands will please you. You'll be forced to be unsure of your desires. If you delight greatly in older, wiser years, here too, believe me, there's an even greater crowd. There's a difference between a one-time fling and long-term relationship material. There you'll find one to love or one you can play with, one to be with just once, or one you might wish to keep. Alcohol is not to be underestimated as social lubricant. Wine rouses courage and is fit for passion. Care flies, and deep drinking dilutes it. Then laughter comes. The poor man dons the horns. Then pain and sorry leave and wrinkled brows. But beware of the beer goggle effect. Don't trust the treacherous lamplight overmuch. Night and wine can harm your view of beauty. Cultivate boundless confidence. First, let faith enter into your mind. Every one of them can be won. You'll win her if you only set your snares. There's a reason why clubs are a place to meet girls, because women want to be somewhere where they can see others and be seen. This is the phrase that Ovid uses, which I find perfectly apt. As ants return home often in long processions, carrying their favorite food in their mouths, or as the bees buzz through the flowers in time, among their pastures and fragrant chosen meadows, so our fashionable ladies crowd to the famous shows. My choice is often constrained by such richness. They come to see. They come to be seen as well. The place is fatal to chaste modesty. They come to see, they come to be seen. This phrase comes to my mind every weekend when I see the girls parade by downtown near where I live. Another lesson is, those who ride the cock carousel are less valuable than the virgin. She who is virgin, who hates Cupid's darts, gives people many wounds, has many to give. The female is hypergamous. Birds will sooner be silent in the spring, cicadas in summer, an Arcadian hound turn his back on a hare, than a woman refuse a young man's flattering words. Even she you might think dislikes it will like it. Secret love's just as pleasing to women as men. Men pretend badly. She hides her desire. Desire in us is milder and less frantic. The male fire has its lawful limits. This implies that women are better at hiding their desire, and also that their desire is not mild and does not recognize lawful limits. To have hand in the relationship, avoid being the one who gives. Let your mistress's birthday be one of great terror to you. That's a black day when anything has to be given. However much you avoid it, she'll still win. It's a woman's skill to strip wealth from an ardent lover. They many times ask for gifts. They never give in return. You lose and you'll get no thanks for your loss. And 10 mouths with as many tongues wouldn't be enough for me to describe the wicked tricks of whores. Don't be the first to say I love you. Send 1 text for every 4 of hers, etc. These are pieces of advice that Royce gave. And Ovid says, but if you don't give, always appear about to. like barren fields that always cheat the farmer, like the gambler who goes on losing lest he's finally lost and calls the dice back endlessly into his eager hand. This is the work, the labor, to have her without giving first, and she'll go on giving lest she lose what she's freely given. Take some care with your appearance, but only within reason. Male beauty is better for neglect, Ovid says. I think there's something to this. Women seem to like the look of a man with a hint of beard stubble, for example, or sometimes a look that's a bit disheveled without being sloppy. Here's what Ovid says. Neatness pleases. A body tanned from exercise. A well-fitting and spotless toga is good. No stiff shoe thongs. Your buckles free of rust. No sloppy feet for you, swimming in loose hide. Don't mar your neat hair with an evil haircut. Let an expert hand trim your head and beard. And no long nails. And make sure they're dirt-free. And no hairs, please, sprouting from your nostrils. No bad breath exhaled from unwholesome mouth. Don't offend the nose like a herdsman or his flock. Leave the rest for impudent women to do, and si quis male vir querit habere virum. In other words, leave all other considerations to women and to bad men who wish to have a man. No doesn't always mean no. Ovid is well aware of a darker aspect of female psychology as well, a part that involves men taking the lead and taking charge, up to and including some fairly rough handling by our modern standards. Though she might not give, take what isn't given. Perhaps she'll struggle and then say, "You're wicked." Struggling still, she wants herself to be conquered. Only take care her lips aren't bruised by snatching, and that she can't complain that you were harsh. Who takes a kiss and doesn't take the rest deserves to lose all that were granted too. How much short of your wish are you after that kiss? Ah me, that was boorishness stopped you, not modesty. Though you call it force, it's force that pleases girls. What delights is often to have given what they wanted against their will. She who is taken in love's sudden onslaught is pleased, and finds wickedness is a tribute. Remain aloof. Play hard to get. What shuns them, they desire the more. They hate what's there. Remove her loathing by pursuing less. Different age groups need to be approached in different ways. One mode won't suit you for every age group. The older hinds spot a trap from further off. If the simple find you cunning, and the modest crude, the poor things will straightway mistrust themselves. So it happens that she who fears to trust an honest man falls to the embrace of some low rascal. The man must be the pursuer, and the woman the pursued. They won't come after you. Ah, the youth has too much faith in his own beauty if he waits until she asks him first. The man must approach first. Speak the words of entreaty. She courteously receives his flattering prayers. To win her, ask her. She only wants to be asked. Give her the cause and the beginning of your longing. Next, you must adapt the methods to the individual woman. I've done, but there's diversity in women's hearts. 1,000 minds require 1,000 methods. One soil doesn't bear all crops. Vines here are good, olives there. This teems with healthy wheat. There are as many manners of heart as kinds of face. A wise man will adapt to many forms, and like Proteus, now melt into the smooth waters, now be a tree, now a lion, now a bristling boar. Additional observation. Ovid suggests religious festivals are a good place to pick up chicks, and specifically mentions one interesting group in connection with this. And don't forget the shrine of Adonis, whom Venus wept for, and the sacred Sabbath rites of the Syrian Jews. The PUAs often observe that getting a woman's interest is uncertain. They may or may not be attracted to you for any number of reasons, but once you've caught a girl's interest, you can use their techniques to keep them. And Ovid says, in his second book, it's not enough the girls come to you through me, the poet. She's captured by my art. She's to be kept by my art, too. There's no less virtue in keeping than in finding. There's chance in the latter. The first is a work of art. Another piece of advice is that women who feel secure in their man are more likely to fall out of love or take interest in others. Ovid has advice along these lines too. Generally, heads are swollen with success. It's not easy to be content with the good times, as a fire with little power, gradually consumed, hides itself, ashes whitening on its surface, but the doused flames will flare with a pinch of sulfur, and the brightness that was there before returns. So, when hearts are numbed by slack dullness and security, love is aroused by some sharp stimulus. Make her fearful for you. Warm her tepid mind. Let her grow pale at evidence of your guilt. Oh, 4 times happy, times impossible to count is he for whom his wounded girl grieves. Interestingly enough, one concept is almost entirely absent in Ovid's poem, the neg, the teasing insult. Instead, he has lots of advice for flattering women and building them up. He advises not to mention faults or the woman's age. But in modern times, the teasing of women does mention things like this, or use things like this. Now, this could be a cultural difference, but it could also be a difference in terms of how the female psychology is due to the cultural impact. In Rome, which is more of a man's world, perhaps the woman had to be built up. In a modern state, the woman may need to be torn down. She may have more of an ego about herself. What we see in Ovid is that many PUA observations about how men and women interact and how women think about men can be found almost verbatim. Even with the comedy and the irony that his poem is full of, there's no real sense that he's lying about women or saying something that's just so far off the mark that it's ridiculous. But rather, the idea is that it's maybe simplified and certainly unromantic, but it also has a ring of truth. If it didn't have a ring of truth, it wouldn't be as funny, it wouldn't be as interesting. And I would say it has more of a ring of truth to it than the modern lie that male and female are equal, or that male and female are the same, or, in a more recent development, that they don't really mean anything at all. I think you'll get further in life following Ovid than by following that.